Welcome to Better Than Ever Live, wherever you're watching or wherever you're listening. Hope you're making today your masterpiece. In today's show, we're going to talk about how your headphones might be causing you to lose your hearing, why 7 hours of sleep might be best for adults, what the longevity diet is, mistakes you might make with exercise that could shorten your life, how exercise protects your brain, and how Oscar-winning actors live longer than other actors. I'm Dr. David Geier, double board certified orthopedic surgeon, sports medicine specialist, and media medical expert. I help you feel and perform your best regardless of age, injury, or medical history. As always, please understand in today's show, all my videos, all my live streams, I'm not giving you medical advice. It's meant for general information and educational purposes only. We have a lot of great topics to discuss today. If you have any comments about that or questions, leave those in the chat if you're watching this on YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Do what you always do. I'd love for you to give your first name and where you're located along with your comment or question, and I'll try to do those as we go. Remember, if you have orthopedic questions, injury questions, that type of thing, I do those on Fridays, and I will be here tomorrow, like every Friday at 12 p.m. Eastern Time for Ask Dr. Geier Live. So if you have an orthopedic question, make sure to show up tomorrow. I'll talk about that again at the end of the show. And if you're wondering, yes, I am not in my scrubs with the Dr. David Geier name and logo on it. I am in one of my Memphis Grizzlies t-shirts. If you watch Ask Dr. Geier Live, or when I would do my That's Gotta Hurt Live, you know I'm a Memphis Grizzlies fan. We had an enormous win last night. Plus, I got done early and was able to take a shower, and I just felt like being casual. But very, very proud of my Grizzlies. We may not pull out the series over the Golden State Warriors, but last night was awesome. And I would argue that it'd be hard to argue they actually aren't the better team in this series, even if they don't win it. I'm really, really proud of my hometown team. All right, let's talk about headphones. This is a big deal. I don't know how to say your name, your first name, but anyway, hi in Romania. Very happy to have you. In Melbourne, Australia. Can't even imagine what time it is there, Ruby. Actually, it's probably early morning. Very, very glad to have people. Romania and Australia probably don't care at all about the NBA, but very, very excited you're here. Let's talk about noise and headphones, because this may not interest all that many people, but it interests me because, one, I think I'm starting to lose just a little bit of hearing in certain ranges, and I suspect that one of the reasons is what we're going to talk about today, and that is headphones may be causing hearing loss. 48 million Americans have some form of hearing loss. Now, the study I'm going to talk about was from the Apple hearing study. Yes, Apple, the electronics and computer company. So you have to sort of take all this with a grain of salt, because everything we're going to talk about sort of pertains to Apple devices, Apple apps, things like that. But they commissioned the study to see how our hearing is impacted over time based on exposure to sounds at certain levels. This Apple hearing study showed that 25% of participants, 1 out of 4, experience a daily average environmental sound exposure, and that's things like traffic, public transportation, machinery, that kind of thing. Their environmental noise is higher than the recommended limit. 25% of the population. 50% of people now work, or at least have worked somewhere that's too loud or too noisy, and that plays a big role on our hearing, and that's why it's important to be aware of your surroundings. There is and I didn't actually know any of this, and I have an Apple Watch. Apparently there's a noise app on it that can check basically the levels of the noise around you, might help you be more aware of sound exposure. But when we're talking about headphone exposure, and again, I think that's where a lot of my issues are, average weekly headphone exposure for 10% of people is higher than the World Health Organization's recommended limit. So Apple recommends, based on this study, that you should listen to music at basically the lowest enjoyable volume. When you did it through AirPods, 30% of users exceeded the noise recommended by using the AirPods. And so there are apps that can help with this. And this is a big deal, whether it's from using music too loud or it's just aging as a cause of hearing loss. There's the noise app on the Apple Watch that you can set up to get alerts when the environmental noise levels, traffic, and everything else might be too high and affecting your hearing health. The Health app on the iPhone tracks the user's history of exposure to sound both now and in the past, whether the headphones and environmental levels are higher than the World Health Organization's. You can use AirPods, the AirPods Pros and the AirPods Max, to basically hear more clearly. You can set it in a way, and I didn't know this at all, that has live listen, so you can use your iPhone to basically function as a microphone. And then there's ways to set up the headphone accommodations to make them sound clearer or crisper based on your hearing. It basically customizes it to your preference. Now, I will say, and again, I have no affiliation with Apple. This is not sponsored or anything like that. I'd say this because this is their study. But I suspect other smartphones and wearable devices have similar things, but this is a big deal. I do remember an otolaryngologist, an ENT surgeon, told me one time that if you're going to listen to music, at least, it's better to do it with something on the ear rather than something like AirPods or headphones, earbuds that go into your ear. I don't know if that's actually true. I'm not an ENT surgeon, but it makes sense. Having it on top of your ear might help protect your hearing maybe more than having it actually in the ear canal. Having said that, doesn't matter what you use, I wouldn't think if it's super loud. So it's something to think about. All right, let's talk about how much sleep is optimal as we get older. It turns out, and this may not be a real big surprise for too many people, but 7 hours is the ideal amount of sleep for people in their middle age and going on. Too little or too much, this is sort of the Goldilocks phenomenon. Too little sleep, too much sleep, poor cognitive performance and mental health. This was a study published in the journal Nature Aging. Researchers at the University of Cambridge looked at data from over 500,000 adults aged 38 to 73 from this UK Biobank database, where people were asked about their sleep patterns, their mental health, their well-being. They did all these cognitive tests, and they actually had brain imaging and genetic data on 40,000 of the people in the study. And what they found is too little sleep or too much sleep were both associated with impaired cognitive performance. Things like processing speed, visual attention, memory, problem-solving skills. 7 hours a night was the optimal amount of sleep for cognitive performance, but it was also the best amount of sleep for good mental health. People had less symptoms or fewer symptoms of depression and anxiety. They had worse overall well-being if they slept less than 7 hours or longer than 7 hours. I know it's a little bit of a Goldilocks phenomenon, but that ought to be your goal. If your goal is mental health and cognitive performance, that ought to be your goal at night, especially when we're talking you're in your 30s, 40s, 50s, and beyond. And so on average, it takes people 20 minutes to fall asleep. So maybe plan on being, going to bed. If you have to wake up at a certain time, let's say 6 a.m., make sure you're in bed by 10:30 p.m., 20 minutes to fall asleep. You should get about 7 hours of sleep. That's kind of how you have to look at it. Again, and I've talked about this, again, not something I'm sponsored by, even though I really should be. I talk about them so much. But the Oura Ring, there's lots of ways to track your sleep. But knowing how you sleep, you'd be surprised how often you wake up or you're not sleeping as well as you think you do. So that's another thing to think about. All right, I want to talk about something now that is something you might have heard about. You are definitely going to hear about this. This is, I talk a fair amount on this show that I am working to get a third board certification in anti-aging and regenerative medicine. And in that world, I'm a member of the American Academy of Anti-Aging and American Academy of Anti-Aging Medicine. And one of the big topics right now is I almost dropped my water bottle. One of the big topics right now is what's called the longevity diet. And I want to talk about that real quick if you haven't heard about it. This is something, like I say, you will hear about. This was a study published in the journal Cell out of the University of Wisconsin. And what the longevity is basically based on is looking at nutrients, fasting, genes, and longevity, and seeing how all of this fits together in terms of humans, in terms of what might be the optimal diet and way to eat to help us live longer. So what this longevity diet is, it is moderate to high carbohydrate intake, high carbs, not keto, but the carbs are not refined carbs, not the processed carbs. They're basically whole food type carbs. some protein, mostly from plant-based protein, and enough plant-based fats like olive oils. 30% of your calories actually coming from plant-based fats like olive oils. You eat all your food within an 11 to 12 hour window, which gives you a daily fasting period of about 12 hours. And then 5 days every 3 to 4 months, you do a 5-day fast or 5-day fasting mimicking diet. And that's to help reduce insulin resistance, lower your blood pressure, and other risk factors for things like cardiovascular disease. Fasting mimicking diet, if you're not aware of it. So fasting, you can probably imagine, that's basically nothing but black coffee, unsweetened tea, or water for 5 days. I've actually done it. It is an interesting feeling, and I was really glad I got through it. I felt great when it was done, but it's hard, no question. Fasting mimicking diet would be eating 400, maybe 500 calories a day for 5 days. Again, falling within the guidelines I talked about earlier. High carb intake, but whole food, vegetable type carbs, not processed carbs, refined carbs, so breads, things like that, white rice, all that kind of stuff would be out. Low protein intake, mostly from plant-based foods, high vegetable oil, but not processed vegetable oils like olive oil, that kind of thing. And the fasting is basically what is called the longevity diet. So lots of legumes, beans, things like that, whole grains, vegetables, some fish, not very much, no red meat, no processed meats. We've talked about that before. The bacons, the sausage, the beef jerkies, the canned meats, the processed lunch meats, things like that. Very low white meat, low sugar, basically no or low refined grains, but yes, nuts, yes, olive oil. You could do some dark chocolate. That is the longevity diet. You are going to hear tons about that, and maybe I'll do a whole longer segment on the longevity diet and where some of the studies that suggest you actually live longer doing it, but I just want you to kind of know that that's out there. All right, I want to talk real quickly about an article I read just recently. This was sort of an article that summarized a bunch of studies that talks about exercise mistakes that shorten your life. And before I even, just with the title, I will say the biggest mistake regarding exercise that will shorten your life is not doing it. That should go without saying. But a few things that the authors point out, some I agree with, maybe some not so much. One, if you're exercising outside, be careful of the air quality. There was a study in the Journal of Cardiovascular Research. Smog shortens your lifespan by 3 years. Air pollution is linked to 43% increased risk of cardiovascular death. Another one, high-intensity interval training. There was a Swedish study that they cite that high-intensity interval training, or HIIT workouts, where you do short intervals going really, really hard within some low-intensity intervals, and you just do those cycles again, that if you do those too often, that can actually inhibit or impair your mitochondrial function and increase insulin resistance. Another one, worrying about exercise might actually shorten your life. So researchers at Stanford found that people who thought they were less active than other people, who exercised less than other people, they thought that, actually turned out to be more likely to die regardless of how healthy they were and how overweight they were. Another one, focusing on strength rather than power. So it seems pretty similar, but strength is basically how much can you lift. Power is not just how much you can lift, it's the speed and the force. Power might be better from a longevity standpoint. The example they give, getting up from a chair deals more with power than it deals with strength. So all of that, for the most part, I think is reasonable. Again, I would say the not doing it is the big mistake. The HIIT training, I've said this before, the type of exercise, what types of exercise you do aren't the same for every person. I think there's a role for HIIT training. I think there's a role for steady state cardio training and endurance, and there's a role for resistance training. And I actually think you need all three. I don't think you need to do HIIT sessions 5 or 6 days a week. A lot of people can do really well with just 1 or 2 of those sessions a week. So maybe there is something to not doing too much. That could be fair, but I think there's a role for all of that. And so it's not an all or none, do this or that, black and white type of thing. All right, exercise might actually protect your brain. How? By actually keeping your insulin levels low and your BMI, your body mass index. There's a new study published in the journal Neurology shows physical activity is good for your cognitive health, helping you stave off dementia. They looked at over 130 people, average age of 69, no memory issues. They filled out surveys about how physically active they were. They did brain scans that measured glucose metabolism and brain volume. They got information about blood pressure, BMI, body mass index, cholesterol, insulin levels, all sorts of things. What they found out, the individuals that had the most physical activity had the highest volume of their gray matter, basically highest volume in their brains compared to individuals with the least amount of physical activity. It also, the ones that exercised the most, not surprising, had the best body mass index numbers and the lowest insulin levels, and those in turn played a role in the brain volume. So yes, it's helping your weight, yes, it's helping stave off type 2 diabetes, but it's also sort of coming full circle affecting your brain. You've heard of type 2 diabetes, this basically insulin resistance that develops by being obese and eating too many refined carbs that is really, really common these days. Well, people suggest type 3 diabetes is cognitive decline, brain changes related to high insulin levels, high blood sugars, things like that. So this all plays a role. The more you exercise, it's not just good for your physical health and cardiovascular health. It's good for your body mass index, body weight, things like that, but it's good for your brain. And the last thing I want to talk about today are actors. Now, I couldn't care less about actors, even though I have done an acting class before out in Hollywood. 7 weeks I did this class. It's terrifying. It was me and 19 other actors. I was trying to use it to be a better public speaker, but you get on stage and do this performance basically in front of everybody in the class. It's absolutely terrifying, but I really liked it. I liked the people in it, had a good time doing it, and I really think it made me a better public speaker, but there is nothing more terrifying than try to be an actor when you're not. But anyway, there was this study that just came out looking at winners of the Academy Award, and they're more likely to live longer compared to actors who have been nominated but didn't win, and those who have never been nominated for an Academy Award. This was a real study published in the journal PLOS ONE, very reputable journal. They looked at from 1929 to 2020, there were over 2,100 actors nominated for an Oscar, or they appeared opposite a nominated Oscar. And yes, this is a real study. It was done with researchers at the University of Toronto. The actors that won the Academy Award, life expectancy was over 81 years old. Those who were nominated but didn't win, their life expectancy was 76.4, almost 5 years shorter. Those who weren't nominated at all, 76.2 years. So what is it? Well, the Academy Award winning actors, something about there's a link between success and survival. So maybe there's something about how you act, psychological factors that play a role in our health, that somehow being successful, pursuing something and being successful might play a large role in our longevity. I don't know. It's one of those things you never really know what to make of that. It may just be that one population. Who the heck knows? Some may be healthier than others. I don't know. They take better care of themselves. But to me, that's really interesting. And yes, I really did take an acting class. Maybe I'll talk about that sometime. If you have any comments about any of those studies, definitely leave those. Yeah, no, I took an acting class where I was trying to work on storytelling and being a better public speaker. So I flew out there to Los Angeles for a Monday night class at the Odyssey Theater, I think, in Los Angeles, over at sort of West LA. And it was I really enjoyed it, but the time that I had to get up and perform, and I was the second to go out of the 20 because it was over many days. Anyway, it was terrifying. If you have any comments about anything else we talked about, definitely leave those. Make sure you join us tomorrow if you have an orthopedic injury. It'll be Ask Dr. Geier Live. If you know people who like this type of thing, health, wellness, aging, exercise, nutrition, sleep, mental health, longevity, aging, talking about some new medical treatments, procedures, things that are out there. Definitely tell people to more about this show, whether they listen to it on Facebook or watch it, Facebook, LinkedIn, or YouTube. definitely do that. Also, make sure to subscribe to the podcast if you can't watch live, Better Than Ever Live, wherever you get your podcast. Tends to go up the day after I do the show. So like today's will be on iTunes and Spotify and everywhere else tomorrow morning. But definitely check that out. If you do have an orthopedic problem and you want to see me specifically, there's a link to my website below. Double board certified orthopedic surgeon, hopefully before too long, triple board certified, adding anti-aging and regenerative medicine. Talk to you about all kinds of treatments, not just cortisone, physical therapy, or surgery. You can contact me through my website. It gets to my assistant. We can talk about how you can come to Charleston to see me or other ways we could potentially work together. Very, very glad to see you. Cool shirt. Yes, I said earlier, I don't know how you can see, Memphis Grizzlies. Here, I'll get that off the screen. My Memphis Grizzlies are in the, no, I can't get this off the screen. There we go. Yeah, my Memphis Grizzlies going to Game 6 of the Western Conference semifinals. Very excited. I'm going to get a ton of hate by saying this because the Warriors fans have apparently been very obnoxious on social media to just Grizzlies writers and things like that that are just minding their own business. But, you know, my brother is an enormous Golden State fan, and my nephew is an enormous Golden State fan. So it's fine. I'm just excited for the city, my hometown. Remember, check out Ask Dr. Geier Live tomorrow. If you have any orthopedic questions, I'll talk about the injury, I'll talk about the surgery, talk about the recovery, whatever it is, for as long as there are questions. I'll be right back here next Tuesday and Thursday, 5 p.m. Eastern. And also make sure, I told you to subscribe. You might subscribe to this show's podcast, Better Than Ever Live. There's also a podcast I do called Better Than Ever Daily. They are 1 minute or less segments, 5 days a week, talking about a health study like what I did today, a different one every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. You can listen to a ton of them on your way to work. I think I've recorded close to 200 of them now. They're just quick little health tips and studies that can help you feel and perform your best regardless of age or injury. So make sure you check out Better Than Ever Daily, the podcast, wherever you get your podcast. Thank you so much for joining me. I look forward to seeing you tomorrow at noon for Ask Dr. Geier Live and next Tuesday and Thursday afternoon for Better Than Ever Live. Have a fantastic rest of your night.